From The Times and The Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Luke Jones.
The centre of gravity is moving north. The meaning is that we are diverting forces, resources, energy towards the north.
On Wednesday night, Israel's Defence Minister Yoav Gallant addressed his troops.
I appreciate that we are at the beginning of a new era in this war and we need to adapt ourselves. This is true for everyone because the position here is stronger. It is not Hamas, it is something else, and we need to prepare for this matter properly.
For 11 months, we've all been focused on Gaza. But for pretty much all this time, that conflict has also played out in fighting between Israel and Hamas's allies, the Iranian-backed militant group based in Lebanon, Hezbollah. Rockets have been fired over the border in northern Israel and southern Lebanon. But on Tuesday, this escalated dramatically. Across 2 days, there were 2 highly sophisticated attacks on Hezbollah. The pagers that they used to communicate, and then the next day their walkie-talkies exploded, wounding and killing their operatives and some people who happened to be near them. At the time of recording, 32 people have been reported dead, with over 3,000 injured. Hezbollah blame Israel. Their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, took to the airways on Thursday afternoon.
How can this criminal act be characterized? It is nothing but a terrorist act. It is nothing but a massacre. And this is the word that we are going to adopt, massacre, to be added to the Israeli enemy's crimes and massacres perpetrated over decades since the creation of this cancerous entity in our region. It is an act of war against the people of Lebanon, Lebanon's sovereignty. It is a declaration of war. It is an act of war and can be characterized as such.
Now, Israel haven't commented on these attacks, but they have said they're entering a new phase of the war. Their focus is moving to their border with Lebanon and the fighting there, which has seen tens of thousands of people evacuated. Could this, as many fear, escalate even further out of control? The story today: Israel declares a new phase of the war.
My name is Alatrush. I am the Times Middle East correspondent.
And Samir, we're recording this Thursday afternoon. Take us back to Tuesday and late afternoon then. When did you first realise that something dramatic was afoot in Lebanon?
I first saw the emergency bulletins coming out of the news agencies there. And the first I saw it, to be honest, someone sent it to me in a message, and I thought it was a joke. Something about pagers blowing up didn't sound very plausible. And soon enough, it was pretty clear that there were simultaneous explosions across Lebanon. The footage started coming in very quickly. Lots of CCTV footage, Hezbollah members going about their daily business, really shopping, commuting. There was lots of pictures that were taken as well. On the street of many, many wounded, almost 3,000 people who were wounded in Tuesday's attack, and at least 12 killed. And just quickly became very obvious that there was an intelligence operation that had targeted Hezbollah's pager devices. It was unmistakable that it showed explosives being set off. And then the following day, we had another wave of explosions, fantastically enough. I mean, it beggars belief that this happened not once, but twice, 2 days in a row.
And even in the second wave of explosions, it was at the funeral of 4 of the dead who had died on the Tuesday that there were more explosions on the Wednesday.
Yeah, so that was there were hundreds of explosions across Lebanon, and in one case that was in Beirut's southern Dahia district, which is a Hezbollah stronghold. There was one explosion where a young man's walkie-talkie blew up just as a procession was starting.
And this time it was walkie-talkies. What kind of images did we get out of Lebanon showing the damage that had done?
Yeah, it was walkie-talkies, and maybe because of their size or the way they were being held, but it did seem to kill more people than the initial attack. The initial attack killed, I believe the list was 12, but many suffered wounds. I mean, some people were killed in that, but most of the wounds were to the torso area. Some had facial injuries as well. Iran's ambassador lost his eye, according to a regime journalist. The attacks yesterday, however, maybe because, again, I'm not sure what explains the higher death toll, but it killed more people. Everyone was affected by this. Commanders, rank and file. Hezbollah is not only a militia, it's also a political party. So bureaucrats, politicians, pretty much everyone in the apparatus is affected by this. Everyone felt this, I think. And for that to happen for a second day in a row, I think it just really has shaken the group's confidence in a way that nothing else has, I think, since they were formed.
And we can understand why some Hezbollah operatives had walkie-talkies, but pagers is a strange one. Explain why so many of them had pagers on them.
Well, the pagers were, I think, seen by Hezbollah as a more secure way of communicating than smartphones, which, smartphones provide Israeli intelligence with not just tracking audio and text messages, but they're also pretty much spy cameras as far as they're concerned. And that's something that Hezbollah had warned about, and they warned their cadres against using them earlier this year. And they instead distributed these pagers, which now, as we know, Israeli intelligence had intercepted at some point and fitted out with explosives.
And what do we know about how that might have occurred? I mean, obviously, lots of people have been looking at some of the images of the pagers and the walkie-talkies and trying to figure out what make and model they were, where they came from. Take us through the trail that people have been sniffing to try and follow where these came from.
Well, the pagers had the brand name Apollo Gold on them, which is a Taiwanese company. And they've denied that they sent the pagers. The Taiwanese government said that no exports had taken place from Taiwan. The company said that this had all been arranged through a shadowy Hungarian consultancy called BAC, B-A-C, and they had lent them their branding. And now BAC is just kind of a bit of a mystery. Its website was taken down right after the attacks. When you look at it, the archives, it just has a very generic website. They claim to have contracts with the EU. They claim to provide a variety of consultancy services. It doesn't seem to have much substance to it. And it was run by a woman called Cristiana Barsoni Archidiacono, if I'm pronouncing that name right. And we contacted her on LinkedIn. She's denied, having had any role in that. But there are suspicions that this was really a front company that may have contributed to this operation. Clearly at some point between the manufacture of these pagers and the delivery, Israeli intelligence had managed to either switch the pagers or sit there, disassemble them, plant explosives in the circuit board, and then send them off to Hezbollah.
And the immediate impact of these 2 days worth of explosions, Samir, is not just obviously people killed and people injured, some very badly injured, but also ordinary people are just petrified. I mean, I've heard from people who, are scared of turning their laptops on, are scared when they see phones because they just don't know what could happen next.
Yeah, I think your average person would be quite scared about that because there were reports also of solar panels exploding and various other gadgets that have exploded yesterday. So nobody's quite sure what was compromised, how far this really kind of goes when it comes to electronic devices. And there's a lot of uncertainty about that. There's uncertainty clearly about an impending war, which Israel's been signaling that it will be conducting a wide-ranging operation in Lebanon. There's a lot of apprehension about that. And for Hezbollah itself, we have several thousand Hezbollah members who are wounded. Every hospital in Lebanon received the wounded. Hezbollah yesterday released the photos and biographies of at least 20 people that have been killed. Now, Hezbollah never says how their people have been killed. They just announce the deaths and they just say they died on the road to Jerusalem. But 20 in 24 hours, that's not the normal death toll that we've seen over the past 10 months. So that's clearly the bulk of that, if not most of these people were killed over the past 48 hours during the pager and then the walkie-talkie explosions. For every person killed, obviously, you'll probably have dozens, if not hundreds, of proper Hezbollah fighters who have been taken out of commission in this. So again, it is a blow for the group. They have resumed their usual military operations. So they have fired rockets on Israel. So that hasn't been affected. I mean, the guns haven't fallen silent because of it. But having all these people injured, at least 20 dead, that's going to take a toll on their operations. And the other thing is also this group needs to be able to communicate with its members, especially ahead of a war. That's clearly been compromised. So we're not sure yet how they're making up for it and what other measures that they put into place and what backups they have. But they would be a bit more in the dark than usual, I think, because the pages were crucial for the group for issuing orders, alerts, mobilization, and that's gone now. This is something that's, I think, shaken the confidence of your average rank and file Hezbollah member. This is a group that's used to having its members killed, its leaders killed. Before Hassan Nasrallah, the current Secretary General, came to power after his predecessor, Abbas al-Musawi, was killed. He was assassinated by an Israeli gunship. This is normal for Hezbollah. This is what it's all about for them. But for something like this to happen, really points to serious and mass failings in their internal security and just really in their basic common sense. I mean, it is astounding that nobody in Hezbollah thought we've ordered something from abroad. Maybe we should have a look at it before distributing it to everyone. Israel has a history of, using its opponent's communication devices to plant bombs in. I mean, they killed Hamas's military commander, Yahya Ayyash, in 1996 by rigging a cell phone and having someone give it to him as a gift.
Tammy, you were describing the death, the injuries, the fear and confusion that these exploding pagers and walkie-talkies have brought on Hezbollah and, I guess, ordinary people in Lebanon as well. Israel haven't commented on it, but it is, as we've sort of been discussing, widely assumed that Israel is responsible for it, and particularly their international spy agency. Who are Mossad?
Well, they're the agency tasked with Israel's espionage and sabotage operations abroad. Internally and in the West Bank and Gaza, it's the Shin Bet, the Shabak, that is in charge of these operations. That's a domestic security agency. Abroad, it's been the Mossad, and they've been around since the founding of Israel. The Mossad have a long history of operations abroad, including hunting down Nazis after World War II and the Holocaust. Now, that included Otto Adolf Eichmann, who was found in Argentina and brought back to Israel to stand trial for his crimes during the Holocaust. They targeted the PLO, particularly after the 1973 Munich Olympics attack. And they spent several years hunting down people who were involved in that attack and assassinating them. And they've also been really the point people for operations in Iran, whether it's assassinating nuclear scientists or Iranian Revolutionary Guard officials, or more recently, a senior Al-Qaeda member who is a guest of the Iranians. There's been numerous incidents in which they've operated abroad they're kind of very, very well known. So this is widely assumed to be a Mossad operation because they're the ones who conduct usually overseas operations or operations abroad.
Yes, but also the way that these attacks we've seen in Lebanon have been done bear the hallmarks of how Mossad approaches things. I mean, even just thinking specifically of the fact that it's communication devices which have been utilised.
Communication devices have been utilized before by Israeli intelligence services, not necessarily the Mossad. For example, the Shabak would have been involved, I think, in assassinating Yahya Ayyash, the military commander of Hamas in Gaza. And that was by rigging a cell phone and inducing someone to give it to him as a gift. He received a call, put it to his ear, and the cell phone blew up. In other instances, for example, during the Second Intifada, they observed a Palestinian militant in the West Bank often using a payphone. So they rigged the payphone to explode when he went to use it. So it's not a one-off. I mean, it certainly hasn't been done on such a mass scale as what we saw this week in Lebanon.
But also part of what they do, it seems, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's not just about the impact of the operation in the first instance. So, taking out an enemy or injuring or killing somebody. It's also in that unsettling fear that it can instill as well. The idea that they're always going to keep plugging away, trying to get you.
Yeah, I mean, this is, a psychological operation wrapped up in a what you could say mass targeted bombing or assassination attempts against Hezbollah members. I think this is something that they knew full well would severely demoralize Hezbollah and create really just a lot of fear and panic in their ranks and perhaps distrust. And that's how you want your opponent to be if you are thinking about launching a major military operation against them, which is what the Israelis have signaled that they're planning to do very, very soon.
Mm. And we should say, Samir, that actually Israel and Hezbollah have been battling and fighting pretty much ever since the latest conflict between Israel and Gaza began 11 months ago. There has been what some people refer to as this shadow war ongoing. Some of those assassinations that you touched on earlier, but also a near daily exchange of rocket fire over the northern Israel, southern Lebanese border.
Yes, the rocket fire has cleared out northern Israeli towns of their residents, and the Israeli retaliatory airstrikes have cleared out towns in southern Lebanon of their residents. So you basically have a buffer zone on both sides of the border now, clear of residents, and just kind of a battleground. I think Hezbollah had been anxious to keep the conflict along those lines. They want to avoid a full-scale war with Israel. They are doing this to support their allies Hamas in Gaza. And they would very much like to see an end to the war in Gaza, because this is something that they have signaled that they feel compelled to do, although they really are not compelled to do it, but that they don't necessarily want to have affect Lebanon. They want to avoid a repeat of the 2006 war between Israel and Lebanon, which devastated Lebanese infrastructure and I think really turned quite a few people against Hezbollah when the dust settled, because it was, seen as a result of their adventurism. Lebanese don't have an appetite for a war with Israel over Gaza. Many Lebanese don't. Hezbollah knows that. At the end of the day, Lebanon's not a democracy, and Hezbollah is a militia that holds sway in southern Lebanon. But there are other factions to consider and their opinions. So that's something that Hezbollah was, I think, hoping it can pull off. The problem is that by conducting these rocket attacks, again, they've emptied Israeli northern towns. There's tens of thousands of Israelis have been forced to flee their home. And Israel, which also wants to avoid a war with Hezbollah, is, they are in a position, though, where they have to think, well, how are we going to get these people back home? Hezbollah is not stopping their rockets. There's going to be no ceasefire in Gaza anytime soon. So we have to take it to the next level, which is what we're seeing now. Whether that works or not, a lot of people are very skeptical that that's going to work. And the fear is that once this military operation starts, I think they're gambling within the Israeli security establishment, the political establishment. They're gambling on kind of their rules of the game staying, but expanding. So they'll do something more punishing in Lebanon than they've done in the past. Hezbollah will do something slightly more punishing than they've done in the past, and they'll keep it contained that way. That gamble is very, very uncertain. That's a problem.
It seems like you're already pricing in Israel moving tanks or soldiers over the border and into the south of Lebanon. I mean, it seems like you think this is already going to go further than it has already.
Israel's announced that they are going to be taking action.
The centre of gravity is moving north. The meaning is that we are diverting forces, resources, energy towards the north. We have not forgotten about the abductees, and we have not forgotten our tasks in the south. This is our duty, and we are carrying it out at the same time.
Americans are still trying to convince them that let's give diplomacy a chance. Diplomacy hasn't worked with Hezbollah so far. So they have started moving formations to the north. The defense minister said attention is turning to the north. The prime minister has indicated that as well. The cabinet voted on it this week. So this isn't just saber rattling. This is something that's in the works, and they're moving towards it. Whether that involves sending ground troops into Lebanon, we still don't know that. It could be just much more intensive airstrikes, artillery strikes, naval strikes into parts of Lebanon that have yet to have been hit, including Beirut. There's been 2 Israeli airstrikes in Beirut since this war began, one of them targeting a Hezbollah commander, the other targeting a Hamas commander. Well, we could be seeing much more of that. In turn, we can be seeing Hezbollah respond with their own rocket fire in areas that they haven't hit before, targeting cities such as Haifa or even south of that. Once that happens, the idea that either side can keep it sort of a wider conflict than what we've seen, but not yet a full-blown war, that seems more and more implausible. Things can go wrong very, very easily.
Because we should say that actually this would be a step up in the conflict, because this wouldn't be Israel fighting more with another organization that's the same size and scale and threat of Hamas. Hezbollah is bigger, better armed, better organized.
Yeah, unlike Hamas, Hezbollah is bigger, better armed and organized, but also they have 150,000 rockets of varying ranges and carrying, up to 500 kilogram warheads. And they know how to use them. And they have a strategic depth, which is Lebanon and into that Syria, that Hamas in Gaza doesn't have. Hamas is stuck in a tiny territory and they have to smuggle in stuff. So in the event of a war with Hezbollah, if Hezbollah chooses to fire thousands and thousands and thousands of rockets in a single day, they can overwhelm Israeli aerial defenses. I think the assumption is that they won't want to do that. They won't want to expend that much of their arsenal, and that they will want to contain it. Again, that's the gamble, but there's no telling if that gamble will anyway bear out. I think that's a major fear.
And do the bigger powers behind each of Israel and Hezbollah also share that aversion to escalation? So namely Iran backing Hezbollah and the US backing Israel.
Yeah, I think the US has made it clear that they don't want to see an escalation, and they are trying to avoid one. The Iranians, you have to separate their rhetoric, which is very belligerent, from, their cold calculations, which are, no, we do not want a war. We don't want to see Hezbollah dragged into a full-scale war with Israel over Gaza. That's something the Iranians don't want, because Hezbollah is their most important ally and asset in the region. Hezbollah is their nuclear option, as it were, and if they ever had to go to war with Israel. And to see Hezbollah degraded, as they will be if this conflict escalates any further, that's something the Iranians have absolutely no interest in seeing. So I think the hope was, they were certainly hoping, the Iranians, Hezbollah, everyone was certainly hoping that there would be a ceasefire in Gaza by now, and people can just go back to their daily business. That hasn't happened. We're in uncharted territory, really. I don't think anyone imagined that this war would go on as long as it has. I think people thought it would be wrapped up in 6 months. But again, it's very hard to predict what happens next. Nobody really wants to see a major escalation. Not Israel, not Hezbollah, not Iran, not America, but here we are.
We said goodbye to Samer at that point, but later in the afternoon, Israeli fighter jets were seen flying over Beirut.
Treating the injured, he said that was a black.
That sonic boom is from them breaking the sound barrier. Israel said that they'd launched airstrikes on southern Israel and that 2 of their soldiers had been killed in fighting near their northern border with the south of Lebanon. Tune into Times Radio for the very latest. Thanks to Samer Alatrush, the Times' Middle East correspondent. There is more from him and the team at thetimes.com if you've got a subscription. Do share this episode with someone who you think might also enjoy it, and do subscribe yourself on whatever app you're listening to us on. The producers today were Priyanka Deladia and Taryn Siegel. The executive producers were Edward Drummond and Kate Ford, and theme music and sound design was by Mauro Seto. I'm Luke Jones, and I'll see you soon.